Sam Elliott wasn't just another actor. To millions, he became the very face of American grit. With that gravel-deep voice, that mustache like a banner, and that unshakable cowboy aura, he carried himself as if carved from stone. But now, at 80 years old, he's broken his lifelong silence. For decades, fans speculated who rubbed him the wrong way, who tested that legendary patience, who crossed the line of respect. And today he names them, 7 actors he admits he truly couldn't stand. Some you'll expect, others will stun you. Keep watching, because this ride into Hollywood's darker canyons is about to begin. Let's dive in. Born in 1944 in Sacramento, California, Samuel Pack Elliott grew up with the rugged landscapes of the West etched into his memory. His father worked in construction, his mother nurtured his earliest ambitions, and young Sam found himself fascinated with storytelling. By the time he reached Oregon, the voice that would one day boom through cinemas was already catching attention. It wasn't polished diction, it was the raw timbre of authenticity. Hollywood, though, wasn't kind to outsiders. In the 1960s and 70s, the studio system still had its gatekeepers. But Sam carried something no agent could manufacture: presence. He wasn't the conventionally handsome matinee idol, nor the fast-talking urban star. He was quieter, broader. His gaze could freeze a scene before he even spoke. That quality landed him early parts in westerns and war films, slowly climbing the ladder until his breakout came with Lifeguard in 1976. But his true destiny was sealed in the saddle. In movies like Tombstone, The Quick and the Dead, and later The Big Lebowski, Sam Elliott wasn't acting the cowboy, he embodied it. He became shorthand for honor, silence, and the kind of strength that didn't need shouting. Audiences leaned in, because when Elliott finally spoke, you listened. Off-screen, however, he kept his life deliberately private. Married to actress Catherine Ross since 1984, raising a daughter away from the chaos of Hollywood, Sam Elliott cultivated the image of a man apart. In interviews, he rarely badmouthed anyone. He was polite, steady, the living embodiment of that cowboy code, which is why his sudden candor at 80 turned heads. Fans weren't used to hearing Sam Elliott call anyone out, let alone 7 peers in the business. Still, the signs were always there. He'd made cryptic comments in interviews. He'd passed on roles in shows he didn't respect. He'd chosen silence rather than compromise. And when he finally opened up, the picture became clearer. Behind that calm, stoic exterior was a man of unshakable principles. When someone or something violated them, Sam Elliott didn't forget. For decades, people speculated about the cracks in Sam Elliott's armor. He wasn't a gossip columnist's dream, no scandals, no bar fights, no messy divorces. But Hollywood insiders whispered about his disdain for certain actors, those who cut corners, those who played to the crowd, those who, in his eyes, mocked the code he'd lived by. At 80, Elliott stopped hinting. He named names, 7 of them. Some were co-stars, others directors, and a few were towering figures he simply couldn't stomach. What united them was a theme: ego versus humility, spectacle versus truth, style versus authenticity. Fans were stunned. Some applauded him for honesty. Others accused him of gatekeeping, of clinging to outdated ideals. But whatever side you take, one fact is undeniable: Sam Elliott's list revealed more about him than about them. Each clash showed the contours of his character, what he valued and what he rejected. So who made the cut? Who did Sam Elliott finally admit he hated the most? Let's count them down, starting with number 7, and trust me, this first name will already raise eyebrows. Number 7, Benedict Cumberbatch. To Sam Elliott, he wasn't just a fellow actor, he was the embodiment of everything wrong with how Hollywood reinterpreted the West. One word defined the tension: authenticity. The story begins in 2021 with The Power of the Dog, Jane Campion's award-winning psychological Western. Critics adored it. The Academy showered it with nominations. But when Sam Elliott sat down for a podcast interview, he didn't see art. He saw a mockery. Cumberbatch's performance as Phil Burbank, a brooding Montana rancher hiding layers of pain, was hailed as brilliant. Yet to Elliott, it felt like theater. Stiff, studied, foreign. It wasn't the first time British actors crossed into American cowboy territory, but for Elliot, this role cut deep. Raised in the grit of the American West, Sam had lived the ranch life. He knew the silence of the land, the weight of boots caked in dust, the pauses between words that said more than speeches. Watching Cumberbatch, he saw posture, costume, and accent, but not the lived soul of a cowboy. The turning point came in that podcast when Elliot finally erupted, calling the film a piece of nonsense and dismissing Cumberbatch as prissy in his delivery. In one moment, decades of restraint vanished, and his disdain for Cumberbatch was sealed. On screen, The Power of the Dog portrayed Cumberbatch as a master of menace. His narrowed eyes, clipped voice, and hidden anguish shaped the film's haunting tone. Critics saw layers of toxic masculinity deconstructed, a bold step forward for the genre. But off-screen, Elliot bristled. According to his own words, he didn't believe a British actor could carry the truth of the American West. Fans heard his voice shake with controlled fury as he asked, "What the hell does this Brit know about the American West?" That single rhetorical question echoed across film blogs, podcasts, and social media threads. Elliot wasn't critiquing just technique. He was challenging the legitimacy of Cumberbatch even attempting the role. For him, a cowboy wasn't a costume to try on. It was a life to be lived. Off-screen, reports suggested Cumberbatch had thrown himself into preparation, learning ranching skills and staying in character even during breaks. Yet none of that moved Elliot. To him, method acting was no substitute for a lifetime steeped in the dust and silence of the West. The receipts are everywhere. Elliot's comments from that podcast were quoted in Variety, The Hollywood Reporter, and across social media. Some fans defended him, arguing that Westerns belong to those who live them. Others clapped back, accusing Elliot of gatekeeping and refusing to evolve with the genre. Cumberbatch himself never issued a public rebuttal, though insiders whispered that he was hurt by the remarks after months of grueling preparation for the role. Meanwhile, Jane Campion publicly defended her star, praising his depth and dedication. For many, Elliot's critique said more about him than about Cumberbatch, revealing a man unwilling to accept a new vision of the cowboy. Still, online threads buzzed. "Sam's keeping it real," wrote one fan, while another shot back, "He's stuck in the past." The debate wasn't just about two actors. It was about who owns the mythology of the American West. For Elliot, this clash was more than a passing feud. It represented the line he refused to cross. He wouldn't soften his image to fit the modern rebranding of masculinity. He wouldn't applaud performances he believed hollow, and he certainly wouldn't apologize for defending the cowboy as he knew it. The fallout may have made him look out of touch to some, but to others, it solidified his image as Hollywood's last sentinel of authenticity. And here's the kicker. Benedict Cumberbatch was only the beginning. If Sam Elliott could dismiss an Oscar-nominated performance so bluntly, imagine how he felt about other stars who bent the rules of the craft. So who came next on his list? Number 6 is an actor whose fiery style made Elliot shake his head in disbelief. Number 6, Nicolas Cage. To Sam Elliott, the man was less a performer and more a firework. Loud, unpredictable, and spectacular, but gone in a flash. The word that defined their rift? Restraint. Sam Elliott built his acting philosophy on silence. He believed a pause could carry more weight than a page of dialogue. Subtle gestures, a narrowed gaze, or the drawl of a single sentence. These, to him, were the tools of real actors. Nicolas Cage, on the other hand, exploded onto screens with an opposite energy. Wild-eyed, volatile, prone to sudden bursts of shouting or manic laughter, Cage turned every scene into an adrenaline rush. Their worlds collided in 2007 with Ghost Rider. Elliot played the grizzled caretaker Carter Slade, a mentor figure steeped in the stoic gravitas. Cage, as Johnny Blaze, leaned into eccentric choices that left audiences divided. On screen, the pairing worked. Contrast was the point. But off-screen, reports suggest Elliot kept his distance. He was polite, professional, but unmoved. In private conversations later relayed by friends, Elliot allegedly described Cage's style as more firework than flame. To him, Cage's unpredictability wasn't art, it was noise. And that noise offended Elliot's core belief. that acting is supposed to serve the story, not steal it. In Ghost Rider, audiences saw Cage transform into a supernatural anti-hero, screaming flames and chains across the screen. Elliot's role was quieter, the guide, the anchor. Together they made a compelling visual, chaos and calm, youth and wisdom. But while viewers may have seen chemistry, behind the curtain Elliot wasn't impressed. He believed Cage's intensity tipped into parody. According to those close to him, Elliot often remarked that acting should simmer, not erupt. Where Cage delivered big swings, Elliot preferred still waters. Cage, by contrast, has spoken in interviews about his nouveau shamanic approach, describing acting as an experiment in pushing limits. Elliot couldn't have disagreed more. For him, it was discipline, not experimentation, that defined greatness. He later told colleagues that actors who hijack scenes with ego make the story bend to them, instead of serving the character. While he never called Cage out publicly by name, fans and insiders didn't need much imagination to know who he was referring to. The evidence lies in interviews and fan reactions after Ghost Rider. Cage's over-the-top style became a pop culture talking point, spawning memes, compilations, and debates about whether he was genius or madness. Critics accused him of chewing scenery. Admirers defended his bold risks. Elliot stayed silent publicly, but those who knew him well say his private remarks were cutting. One line stuck: more firework than flame. Fans who discovered that remark later echoed it across comment sections, saying it perfectly captured Cage's career. On forums, some argued that Cage brought life to a role that could have been bland. Others said Elliott's quiet gravitas was the only thing grounding the film. The divide mirrored the larger question: should acting be a storm or a whisper? Cage represented the storm. Elliott embodied the whisper. Fans took sides. For Sam Elliott, the clash with Cage wasn't personal, it was philosophical. It underscored his fear that Hollywood was rewarding spectacle over substance. Cage's Oscar win for Leaving Las Vegas didn't sway him. Neither did the cult love for Cage's eccentric performances. Elliott saw a dangerous trend, an art form losing its quiet dignity, drowned in noise. It didn't change Elliott's path. He kept to his steady course, measured roles, deliberate choices, and an insistence on subtlety. But the Cage experience reinforced his belief that his way of acting was becoming a rare species in Hollywood. And that made the rift sting even deeper. But Nicolas Cage wasn't the only one. Next up, number 5, is a household name whose polished cowboy image made Elliot roll his eyes. Number 5, Kevin Costner. To most, he's the face of modern westerns, a leading man who kept the cowboy genre alive for a new generation. To Sam Elliott, though, Costner's version of the West was little more than dress-up. The word that defined their rift? Authenticity. Kevin Costner's path into cowboy cinema came decades after Elliott had already carved his place. Films like Wyatt Earp, 1994, and later the mega-hit series Yellowstone gave Costner a reputation as a rugged storyteller of frontier life. Critics praised his brooding intensity and slow-burn delivery. But for Elliott, the problem wasn't Costner's fame, it was the gloss. Raised in the real American West, Elliott believed the cowboy was a man shaped by dust, silence, and hardship. To him, Costner's portrayal was too polished, too pretty, like a fashion spread masquerading as frontier grit. The turning point came when Elliott reportedly turned down a cameo in Yellowstone. According to insiders, he dismissed it as a soap opera with a cowboy hat. That wasn't just a rejection of a role, it was a rejection of an entire vision. Costner, in Elliott's eyes, wasn't living the code. He was performing it. On screen, Costner commanded attention. His character, John Dutton in Yellowstone, exuded power, family loyalty, and patriarchal gravitas. Millions of viewers tuned in to watch him navigate land battles and blood feuds, cementing the show as one of the most successful cable dramas of all time. But off-screen, Elliott reportedly bristled. Friends say he scoffed at Costner's clean boots, manicured hair, and dialogue that rolled too smoothly for a man meant to be hardened by the land. "He plays a rancher like it's cosplay," Elliott once muttered in private, according to those close to him. In his worldview, No number of scenic shots or moody monologues could make up for what Costner lacked, the grit of lived experience. Though no public feud erupted, producers noted a frost between the two men. One longtime insider described it best: they never yelled. But the chill between them could freeze a desert. To Elliot, Costner's West was Hollywood fantasy. His own was carved from bone and dust. The receipts are subtle but telling. Elliot never appeared in Yellowstone, despite fans clamoring for a cameo. Instead, he took a starring role in 1883, a prequel in the same universe, but with a darker, harsher tone. To many, that choice was his silent statement. Fans debated endlessly. Was Elliot shading Costner by calling Yellowstone too polished? Was 1883 his way of reclaiming the West from soap opera theatrics? Online, the split was clear. Costner loyalists argued that he brought prestige and mainstream appeal to the genre. Elliot's fans shot back that Costner was a tourist in boots, while Elliot was the real deal. Blogs, Reddit threads, and even trade magazines picked up the whispers of a quiet rivalry, one never spoken on red carpets, but lived in casting choices and comments overheard. For Elliot, refusing to align with Costner wasn't about ego. It was about principles. Accepting a role in Yellowstone would have felt like endorsing a vision of the West he didn't recognize. Instead, he chose 1883, a series he felt preserved the raw truth of the frontier. That decision reinforced his reputation as Hollywood's guardian of authenticity, a man unwilling to bend even for the biggest TV show in America. To Costner, the silence may not have mattered, but for Elliot, it was everything. He'd rather walk away than betray the code he'd lived by for 80 years. And if you think Costner's Polish irked him, wait until you hear who lands at number 4, a method actor whose shocking antics left Elliot rolling his eyes. Number 4, Jared Leto. To many, he's the ultimate chameleon, a rock star, an Oscar winner, a provocateur who'll sacrifice anything for a role. To Sam Elliott, though, Leto was the poster child of pretension. The word that defined their rift? Discipline. Sam Elliott always said acting was about humility. You did the work, you honored the story, and you never drew more attention to yourself than the character demanded. Jared Leto's approach was the polar opposite. By the mid-2000s, Leto was making headlines for immersive method acting, sending rats to co-stars on Suicide Squad, refusing to break character between takes, and framing extreme behavior as dedication. Elliot and Leto never worked together directly, but their paths nearly crossed. Elliot was reportedly attached to a film later reshaped around Leto's casting. Once he heard about the change, he quietly stepped away. To those who knew him, that wasn't indecision. That was a statement. Friends say Elliot muttered that Leto treated acting like a carnival, spectacle packaged as commitment. For Elliot, who considered acting sacred ground, that was unforgivable. On screen, Leto dazzled audiences. His transformation into Rayon in Dallas Buyers Club earned him an Academy Award. His willingness to vanish into roles made directors praise him as fearless. Fans marveled at how he could look unrecognizable from one project to the next. Off-screen, Elliot's disdain only grew. According to industry insiders, he rolled his eyes at stories of Leto mailing bizarre gifts to castmates. To Elliot, tormenting co-stars wasn't artistry, it was indulgence. He believed acting should whisper, not scream for attention. Leto's insistence on living as his characters 24/7 felt, to Elliot, like performance art aimed more at tabloids than at the truth of storytelling. The generational divide was stark. Leto represented a new Hollywood, where shock value doubled as publicity. Elliot represented the old code, where the craft lived and died within the frame of the camera. For Elliot, the choice to avoid Leto wasn't about rivalry. It was about protecting the sanctity of the work. The receipts were everywhere, not in Elliot's own interviews, but in the headlines surrounding Leto. Stories about him sending used condoms to co-stars, remaining in character on set, or requiring crews to adapt to his methods dominated entertainment news. Fans debated endlessly. Was Leto a genius pushing boundaries, or a diva demanding attention? On Reddit threads and comment sections, Elliot's name popped up often. Sam would never tolerate this nonsense, one fan wrote. Others speculated that Elliott's silence about Leto was as telling as any insult. Industry sources confirmed that Elliott had walked away from a potential project once Leto was cast, further fueling the perception of disdain. While Elliott himself never named Leto publicly, fans connected the dots. His values didn't need translation. By quietly distancing himself from Leto, Elliott cemented his identity as Hollywood's watchdog of discipline. In an era where outrageous stunts were celebrated as commitment, Elliott stood firmly against them. He wasn't trying to stop Leto's rise. He was protecting his own principles. For Elliott, acting wasn't about breaking headlines. It was about breaking hearts with truth. And in choosing silence over spectacle, Elliott showed that sometimes the strongest rejection isn't loud. It's walking away. But Jared Leto wasn't the only actor who clashed with Elliott's standards. Number 3 takes us into even murkier waters, a co-star whose charm and sitcom fame collided head-on with Elliott's old-school gravitas. Number 3, Ashton Kutcher. To millions, he's the affable prankster from That 70s Show and a rom-com favorite. To Sam Elliott, however, Kutcher symbolized everything wrong with modern stardom, charm without weight. The word that defined their rift, standards. When Netflix launched The Ranch in 2016, it paired two unlikely figures, Ashton Kutcher, the tech-savvy millennial star with sitcom fame, and Sam Elliott, the veteran cowboy of Hollywood. On paper, the contrast was perfect, the young dreamer son clashing with a grizzled father. On screen, it often worked. But behind the scenes, Elliott reportedly struggled to take Kutcher seriously. He came from the school where actors earned their stripes slowly, bit parts, character roles, and years of quiet persistence. Kutcher, by contrast, skyrocketed to fame on That 70s Show, then parlayed charisma into movies, investments, and viral fame. To Elliott, that trajectory felt unearned. One insider recalled Elliott shaking his head and muttering, "He's a decent guy, but no real actor." It wasn't malice, it was disappointment. Kutcher wasn't the enemy, but he embodied an industry Elliott no longer trusted. On screen, Kutcher's Colt Bennett brought youthful energy and comedic timing, while Elliott's Bo Bennett grounded the series with stoic gravity. Fans loved their father-son clashes, praising the chemistry between the two. Publicly, Kutcher often gushed about Elliott, calling him a mentor and praising his discipline. Off-screen, though, sources described a quiet frost. Elliott didn't sabotage scenes or cause drama, but his silence spoke volumes. Crew members noticed subtle gestures, a narrowed glance, a muttered comment, or a quiet shake of the head when Kutcher flubbed lines or leaned into sitcom-style delivery. In Elliott's eyes, Kutcher was too light, too glossy, a performer molded by media rather than forged by hardship. He once remarked privately, "He's acting like a guy who saw acting on YouTube." For Elliott, that wasn't cruelty. It was a verdict. The receipts are in fan reactions. Many viewers loved The Ranch but admitted that Elliott seemed to be carrying the weight of authenticity while Kutcher leaned on charm. Critics noted that Elliott elevated the material while Kutcher sometimes felt out of place. On social media, debates broke out. Was the odd pairing deliberate genius or a mismatch? Kutcher himself never hinted at tension, always praising Elliott in interviews. But fans noticed the imbalance. "Sam makes it feel real," one commenter wrote, while Ashton feels like he's visiting. Elliott never aired his feelings publicly, but his demeanor on set, quiet, stoic, unimpressed, became its own kind of evidence. Fans who picked up on those vibes saw the truth between the lines. For Elliott, working alongside Kutcher reaffirmed his suspicion that Hollywood was prioritizing relatability over substance. He didn't dislike Kutcher as a person. What he rejected was the system that put charisma above craft. By showing up, doing his work with dignity, and refusing to compromise his standards, Elliott made a statement. He would not bend, even for Netflix's algorithms. The collaboration gave fans memorable scenes, but for Elliott, it was also a reminder that the old code was fading fast. He was one of the last men standing, and he knew it. But if you think a sitcom star ruffled Elliott's feathers, wait until you see who shows up at number 2, a director whose public rebuke turned into one of Hollywood's most surprising feuds. Number 2, Jane Campion. To the world, she's the Oscar-winning director of The Piano and The Power of the Dog, celebrated for her uncompromising vision. To Sam Elliott, though, she represented an outsider meddling in sacred ground. The word that defined their rift? Legitimacy. The tension began in 2021, when Elliot appeared on a podcast and torched The Power of the Dog. He mocked Benedict Cumberbatch's performance, dismissed the film's pacing, and went further, questioning Jane Campion's right to tell a Western story at all.